So good morning. I like in Spiritual Bootcamp particularly just to put a bit of theory out, stuff about body-based therapy and body-based psychology, because as you see, it's kind of new in many ways. It's kind of old in some ways, but kind of new. And also because people ask me, I'm going to record this on YouTube. So how it goes, I talk for a bit, and then we have some space for questions. Initially for questions that you're happy to have your voice on YouTube. No one can see you, but and then I switch off the recording and any other time for any other questions where you'd rather not have your question in public forum. Hopefully that feels fair for everybody. And we can just kind of get started. Also, if you are someone a bit like myself who has some level of impulse control issues, and when you've got a question you just need to ask it right now, that's okay. I mean, it'll be recorded and stuff, but it's okay for me, because I've always been a bit like that, really. Me, and so I'm happy to facilitate that. If it's too many questions all the time and we can't speak, then they can't go any further, then we'll have to discuss it a little bit, but it's okay to just put questions out, or if I'm not explaining something well, I think most of you are pretty good at English, so hopefully I'm not speaking too fast. Okay, so I put a heading up here, the problem with psychotherapy, because when we consider therapy and the NHS, or in America the health service and system, the stuff you've got going in Europe, and that a lot of it kind of originates from the 1800s. And guys, when we think about psychotherapy and therapy, we often might think about, say, Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung, Adler, various different therapists, famous therapists who've been around. And nowadays, if you want to go and study, you want to become a psychologist and work with people, you might go and study clinical psychology. It would take you in the UK 6 years to get a PhD and all of that. And there's one kind of huge problem which is overlooked, in a sense, in all of this, which I want to talk about. Because, if we look generally at how our society has progressed, often it's been very, quite intelligent, creative minds that have moved us on. If you want to look at engineering, Isambard Brunel or someone like that, made big boats and bridges and things like this. Very intelligent, kind of mind-based people, often men, who moved the culture and the society on from the industrial era. And so it's kind of natural in a way that when we start to talk about therapy and human life and the problems that we get as social beings, that we kind of look to the mind and we look to this male culture to understand it. But what my opinion is very strongly is that this doesn't really work. It doesn't really work. And so the kind of psychotherapeutic models that we've got have been created predominantly by quite mind-orientated males. That historically is the case. And can anyone see a problem there at all? Have a wild stab in the dark if you don't mind your voice being on YouTube. Anybody got an idea?
That is too logical and disconnects us sometimes from our emotions.
Yes.
Actually from other people.
Yes.
Like even in school, a kid is rewarded by being smart, but when the kid is sad or cries, like everybody is like shames him or stares at him down.
Yeah.
And instead of actually seeing the charisma that is in the kid and being happy, being loud, being expressive, they look at down as like just to shut his emotion down, be logical, ask question, don't speak up.
And that's the wider sociological thing.
Yeah.
But the core of it is, you're right, they're not people who are very emotional. And to study for 6 years to get a PhD, if you're highly wildly emotional, it's going to make it difficult to learn all these theories. And yet what most of these theories from, I think a guy called, I'm not really an expert, Charcot. Anyone heard of Charcot? French psychoanalyst from the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and later on Freud. The main thing that they came up with was this idea of an unconscious mind. That we can repress feelings, and that this repression of feelings is a problem. But of course, one of the main ways that we are repressing feelings and holding them down on a moment by moment basis is by thinking a lot. It's by thinking a lot. When I first came into the Osho communities and the Osho sphere, this kind of model of how it was appeared kind of intuitively to me, that there were like almost 3 layers to our psyche, like a kind of tree trunk diagram. Thinking, feeling, being. And that I was very, very much stuck in this outer layer of thinking all the time. And I started to become aware that all this thinking and all of these beliefs, all of these ideas about how the world was, all it really was doing on a deeper level was creating a barrier here between feeling what was going on inside. To actually really, I had a lot of primal wounding from abandonment, from invasion wounds and stuff from my own childhood. And I was busy, all this thinking was directed out at the world so that I could keep this layer of primal wounding hidden, keep it inside, not affecting my life. It's very, maybe you can relate to it. I won't talk excessively about this model, but basically I came to understand, and it's probably the case for a lot of people who work with deep emotions, that being very good at thinking isn't necessarily very useful. It's actually quite a disconnect. And so, sure, if you're building a bridge or you want an ocean liner to go across the ocean without sinking, you need to be good at thinking and modelling and doing calculations and stuff like that. But when you want to investigate what goes wrong with humans and why we get in a fucked up mess and our society degenerates and stuff like this, it's much more useful to really understand feeling on an experiential and personal level, to be in contact with your feelings. So this is a fundamental problem with psychotherapy as I see it. Not that it is in any way wrong in many ways, but just that the whole structure that's come through to our modern day NHS in the UK has come from the mind, not from people who are emotionally fluid, who are emotionally intelligent or competent, but from people who are very good at thinking. And this thinking has also happened largely to blockade the primal feelings. If you study the lives of Freud or Jung, you will see they were not particularly enlightened beings. Carl Jung famously, at some point, I think Osho talks about it, got a mistress, and
Stuff with patients.
was he as well? He was with the patients as well. But anyway, he had this mistress, and he had a wife, and then he had a girlfriend as well. And then to kind of justify it, he wrote a paper about how men need two types of women. The kind of the wife and the mistress. He didn't in this paper write about women needing two types of men, the lover and the stable one. He just saw it that way. And this was this very male-dominated perspective. He wasn't so much, as I see it, looking deeply inside what was going on with him. And so our culture has been in this patriarchal kind of mind-based structure, and it's given us a lot, but it's also really failed us in a lot of ways. It not really failed us, but it hasn't. It's time for something new to really come in, because when we try to create mental health and emotional health, we're still looking a lot to the mind, to drugs, psychotherapy, different mind-based strategies all the time to heal things. And we haven't really yet got to a kind of an emotional understanding, of what's going on. The feelings, it's really useful to understand feelings and to have access to feelings. That if you're going to try and be a therapist and treat people one-to-one or in groups, if you can't be in touch with your own feelings, it's going to be very difficult. All you can do is refer to ideas and concepts about therapy and then try and get your patients to or clients to to do what you tell them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You got it. And that's the situation we've got with a lot of psychotherapists. You do 6 years of a PhD, for clinical psychotherapy. Yes, you do some level of client experience, but you're not in a group room screaming and shouting. You're not necessarily in touch with your anger. You're not necessarily in touch with your pain. It's like you may be still very, very disconnected from your feelings. And in a sense, that makes you more functional out in the world often, because you're driven to function. So this is a problem with psychotherapy as I see it. But one very interesting thing that I think psychotherapy has given us, because something that's kind of popular in science, and that is the idea that there's one kind of cause. I don't know much about physics, but I hear chatting to people that the idea that there's one kind of substance to the universe is very popular. One grand theory of stuff, and also the idea that there's one problem that humans have, and if it was made better, you know, we would be okay. Our societies would be happy and healthy and would be functional. You know, and we've looked a lot to politics for that, you know, to create different political systems to make us functional. And it's pretty fair to say, I think that that hasn't really worked very well. But in my opinion, there is one problem. There is just one problem, and that's come from our evolution and our brain development, that if we start to correct that, our whole society will become spontaneously much more naturally happy and creative. And that problem is, anyone have a guess? One word. Begins with R. Repression. Because this brain this human brain, you know, is built with a capacity to repress emotions, which essentially means not to feel what's happening in the moment, what's being triggered in the moment, but to store it away somewhere else. And this defense mechanism, you know, is present in the brain from a very early age. I don't think it's fully understood neurologically, but it is generally accepted. It's generally the capacity to repress emotions. And what I think is useful to understand with the human brain is that probably this capacity to repress emotions in very small children or whenever, you know, the idea somewhere in it is that they also release the emotions at some point. You know, if you think about our primate ancestors, it's more likely what happens for them is that, yes, in certain dangerous situations, they repress their emotional instincts of what's happening. You know, they go into fight or flight mode, or they may try and play dead and present no threat to the environment. But when the threat has passed, they have some mechanism to release the emotional charge that's been stored in the body. You know, maybe sometimes they shake. You see animals shaking or making sound, you know, naturally releasing it. But what's characteristic of humans, as opposed to, say, our nearest ancestors in the primate zone, is we have a very evolved prefrontal cortex up here, which is like, it's like an organ of the brain which governs our personality and how we appear. And so without this very complex prefrontal cortex, probably traumatic events that have happened where we have repressed feelings, we would quickly release them. But the reality is we tend to harden the self-image of who we should be or who we want to be, and we never release. We just keep stuff down. We keep stuff down. Finally, I see it just like an anomaly of evolution, an area where evolution hasn't served us very well. You know, and this, when you really track it back, so many problems that our society come from the fact that people have got a lot of repressed feelings inside. You know, we have whole movements of social change going on which have positive effects, like Me Too movement or something like that, and which I think are good. But at the same time, they just create, in a sense, more division, and they don't, you know, the real issue is people not feeling okay to say no, to really put their boundaries down, which is a natural thing inside every human psyche. You know, it's a capacity to create safe boundaries. But when the culture has oppressed women for so long, they don't feel capable to do it. You know, then the problem comes. So it wouldn't be there if people felt, if everyone was okay with anger and understood it and was in touch with their anger, for example, then our society would be very different. We wouldn't need to implement quite so much social control over people. We wouldn't need to engineer or manipulate them into certain behaviours. And likewise with pain. If we were all comfortable to express emotional pain, to talk about our childhoods, to appear vulnerable, you know, to allow people to come close to us, you know, then again, vast amounts of battle and conflict and strife and drama that goes on, and men in particular holding off from each other, you know, it would start to go away. And so, you know, my belief is if we could, you know, deal with the primary issue of repressing emotions, our society would become very healthy. I think we've had enough of political change, personally. I don't think anyone who's really aware in their 40s, 50s, been around for a while, thinks that political change, I certainly don't think it's going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference. We've seen it all before, you know. It's not really about the outside. It's about the inside. It's about the inner world. So having mentioned this and the idea that, you know, repression of feeling and sustained repression of feeling is the ultimate problem that the society really faces on external and internal levels, we can look a little bit why people repress and or how they repress. And essentially, there's two classic reasons why we end up repressing our feelings and not really being emotionally present. Not dealing with it. One is trauma, and the other is conditioning. These are the two words usually used in psychology. And trauma essentially refers to any very emotionally provocative event that occurs to you at any point in your life where you don't really feel the full impact of it at the time. Often it refers to early childhood, perhaps abandonment wounds. There's two basic types of traumatic wounding. They come into two categories. So we look at trauma, we've got abandonment. Usually that is when you expect something to be there and it isn't there. Like as little kids, we have a certain level from our DNA of expectation of how our parents will behave with us. We might expect our mama to just be there. It's like reaching out for mama. She's not there. It hurts. There's pain inside. She's not there. And the capacity if it's traumatic, is to then suppress that pain inside the system. It's judged by the brain too much to feel. The other type is the opposite, invasion. This is expecting something to be there or someone to be there and they're not there. Invasion is expecting people to keep their distance and they come through your natural boundaries. Examples are parents who don't allow you to really be you in a useful way. They go beyond giving you proper boundaries into really invading your space, controlling you psychologically. Sexual invasion, physical invasion, violence received as children. Sexual abuse. It's the opposite. It's something you're expecting to hold your boundaries, but something is overwhelming your boundaries, particularly at a time when you are relatively defenseless as a little kid. And this tends to leave a wound more of anger in the system. So there's repressed anger in the system from invasion. So these are the two kinds of trauma. And we often think of them happening in early childhood, but of course, they can happen at any time. You could be in a war, you could be mugged, you could have something really traumatic happen to your partner, could suddenly die or suddenly leave. There's all sorts of ways that you can get traumatized. And these days there's much more understanding and willingness, I think, to accept trauma as a real phenomenon. In the 70s, after the Vietnam War, I think Bessel van der Kolk, something like this, or Kolk or something, a Dutch guy, a Dutch-American, wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. He was a famous psychiatrist, and he started to create the concept a bit of PTSD, along with some other researchers, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so trauma is becoming increasingly understood. So this is one mechanism by which we end up repressing emotions into the body, essentially, or we end up repressing emotions. The other mechanism is conditioning, which is, if I look at my own life, growing up in Essex mostly, at a certain age, it was like I had social needs. I didn't really articulate it in my own in a language like this, but I wanted friendships, first of all. I wanted to have friends at school, around where I lived and stuff like that. A little bit later, I wanted to be attractive to the opposite sex and try and get girlfriends, have lovers, have sex. And a little bit after that, I wanted to get a job, to have like a role in society, to feel like I was a man and had a role. And these three kind of things, conditioning, friends, lovers, role, they're all kind of natural social needs, as I see it, that pretty much anyone will want these things. But what I learned was that if I was going to get friends or have any chance of getting lovers or get a job, I had to be a certain way. I had to be a certain way, which means I had to kind of radiate a persona outwards, radiate who I am, who I want you to see, outwards. And like we said earlier, the job of executive control over your personality is from this prefrontal cortex up here. That's its job. It's there and it's got to regulate your personality. The idea is that it does it so you can get your needs met. So that other people that you want to be friends with will want to be friends with you. We learn how do we need to appear. I learned I was supposed to appear cool as a teenager. You have to be cool, you know, pretty chilled with things and stuff like that, and having a bit of, you know, property or a car or anything like this. I was pretty dysfunctional on this level because I was so traumatized, basically, and I didn't get very far with any of these at all. And I actually ended up doing the opposite, which was more dropping out and becoming a rebel and a punk, you know, wearing black and this kind of thing. And it still functions. You still find friendships, you still get a role, and you still find other dropout punk lovers. But it was a different way to a standard model. But the idea was, you know, hopefully you can recognise it. You need to look like a certain kind of person, dress a certain way, have a certain attitude, be a certain way. And there's nothing really wrong with that. But the problem is that the way we go about achieving this, or the way our brain goes about achieving this, again, is to just repress more and more areas of our natural emotionality. As a teenager, to be wildly angry or to suddenly be able to burst into tears and pain was not considered very cool. You know, as a young man growing up, you go out with the other guys playing pool, you lose a game or something, you know, you can't just burst into tears and start crying and want to hug the other guys. You know, in Essex in the 1980s, wouldn't really get much approval. You know, you can't do that. You know, you can posture and be a bit aggressive and tough. You know, and women have their own things around, you know, how to appear to other women, how to fit in, how to blend in. Is it true?
Of course it is. Yeah. There's a lot of conditioning.
So when we look at repression, we've got these two big branches of how we end up basically repressing feelings and then keeping them down. And now we can look a little bit at where this happens and how to correct it, essentially. Which is, on a physical level, what happens is, let's try. I'm really not very good at drawing things. Let's try and make some kind of thing.
It's quite hard to underestimate, to overestimate conditioning, isn't it? Even just us here today, we're all performing a certain role, aren't we, in order to be the student and you to be the teacher. There's just conditioning in every single situation we're in. It's so inherent in everything we do.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. And like I say, there's nothing really wrong with it, because you know the reality is our society is how it is. It's not totally transformed. It's nice to be able to go out in the world and be a certain way with my girlfriend, or go and hang out with the guys and be a bit more male or whatever. But if I'm achieving that by constantly repressing stuff, then that's not very healthy for me, as we kind of see, but it's totally true. Here's a picture of someone, not a very good one. But essentially what's going on is that this part of the brain up here, the prefrontal cortex with this, you know, it wants to project a kind of idealised version of me out into the world for you to see. And there's two ways it goes about doing this. One, essentially it will repress a broad spectrum of emotions into the back of the body, essentially, because, you know, when we want to look good, we want our front to look good. We don't really care about the back. We want our face to look good, we want the front to look good. Hey, I'm a cool guy, or whatever, or I'm very male, ladies, you know, fancy me, whatever it is. You know, you want the front to look good, maybe some tattoos, short sleeve shirt, whatever, you know, down the gym, whatever you think is going to work. You know, you want to look, we want to look good on the front side. So this bit of the brain thinks, well, okay, where should we put all the shit that we're not expressing? Let's put it in the back of the body, particularly the lower back, the backs of the legs, around the shoulders is another kind of favourite storage zone. It's a bit like having like a garbage bucket in your kitchen and you never empty it. You know, you just never empty it. There's nothing really wrong with a bit of repression, but if you don't empty it, then of course what happens over time is you get very rigid, you get a lot of rigidity. The other way that we tend to repress is through kind of restricting or controlling certain emotional centres in the body that relate to areas of the body. The belly is often associated with personal power and anger, and so we might learn to pad out our belly with food, to not feel the volatility of anger inside, you know, for fear if I'm too angry and reactive, I'll never get any friends or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. The heart around here, we close the heart so we don't feel pain. Not the physical heart in here, but the emotional centre here. And the throat around here, this kind of natural expressivity that as a healthy human we have, we learn to constrict and control it. Our parents tell us maybe, you know, little kids should be seen and not heard, or whatever it is, you know, and we just, music teacher tells us, oh, you're crap at singing, go to the back of the class, you know, all this kind of stuff, you know. So it also operates to constrict around the heart, belly and throat in particular, and repression of feelings into the back line of the body. Did you want to say something?
Something that I wanted to add is like, I can sense, let's say, if we go even in social interactions or situations where people are in the bus or in the tram, it's like stimulation. It's like, it feels that like by default, like you said, we are tense in the neck, or like sometimes I sense my belly gets like tense. Like it's like I breathe, but it's not natural and flowing. It's tension there.
Yeah.
Because there's like this like social pressure from outside.
Sure, it's intense being alive. In reality, it's intense being alive, you know, to going into multiple social situations, living in an urban environment with people around all the time, people just walking through your boundaries sometimes. Also, it's incredibly intense, emotionally provocative environment. And the sense is that we need to really, in order to have any hope of getting our needs met, we need to exert a lot of control. And this control is then results in all this tension, and then, you know, you look at some of the negatives which happen over time, essentially very ritualized behaviors, you know, in a daily pattern, getting to daily patterns, maybe of using certain substances, coffee or alcohol or weed or whatever at certain times of the day, you know, just to keep this onslaught of kind of feeling that's sitting in the body from coming up into your awareness and you feeling it, you know, keeping stuff down. So we've got substances and kind of ritual lifestyle, daily pattern. Anyone else think of any other ways that you might keep all these feelings down, how we do it?
Trying to escape being with ourselves.
Yeah.
Like many times we can't just like sit for 10 minutes in our room and do nothing. Being with ourselves feel many times like being with the devil. It's like it starts bubbling inside of this like
entertainment, distraction, you know, something to take you away from whatever's going on. Blaming, developing a model of a world where, you know, the problems you've got are due to something on the outside as you perceive it.
Denial.
Yeah, similar. Or essentially saying, you know, just really maintaining this rigid thing that like, I'm fine, you know, I'm fine. You know. Or is it fucked up, insecure, neurotic and...
What about addictions?
Yeah, so yeah, you know, substances and just kind of using stuff on a daily basis, you know, in a ritual fashion. These are all means by which we simply, this weight of feeling that's sitting in our body, that's not been expressed, not been felt, not been shown to the world, it's just sitting there. It doesn't just go completely away. You know, it operates on us on a daily basis, on a moment by moment basis often. And then it's, you know, we use all these behaviours to keep it down. And we kind of go along with it, you know, because for some reason the mind just keeps on doing the same program. It keeps on thinking, even if our love life is utterly dysfunctional, the chances are we will never take any real action about it. We'll just carry on with the same ritual behaviours, believing that they will eventually work. When I was a teenager and in my 20s, I would drink alcohol a lot. I was very shy and afraid of women, and I would never talk to any woman that I was sexually attracted to, fancied in some way. But if I drank about 4 or 5 pints, then it would kind of, for a little while, I would feel more open and I would feel kind of more confident, and I could go up and talk to women. Then if I drank any more alcohol, I would just kind of collapse and be an obvious drunken mess, you know. But nevertheless, this behaviour never really worked. I had 1 or 2 girlfriends for a while, or other girlfriends who were also drinking a lot. And you might end up having sex, but if you weren't both repulsed by each other the next day, you might end up having a short-term relationship for a little while. But it was totally dysfunctional if I look back for like 15 years of how I was trying to run my love life. But I kept on doing it. You know, you get to Friday night, think, oh yeah, go down for a few pints, maybe I'll meet someone, you know, hang out with the guys, maybe you go to that pub, maybe there'll be someone nice there, whatever, you know, it's the same, you know, the same ritualized behaviors. We just do it. And likewise with jobs, you may find yourself always in the same position over and over again, but don't really look inside what it's about, you know. It's kind of scary, you know. It's like we have this ego that somewhere thinks we've really got it together and are moving forwards. But if you look at that objectively, often we'll see a lot of our lives are very dysfunctional in reality. Anybody else got any insights here, or anything you see in your own life or behaviour?
There's something that you mentioned about boundaries and also like about relationships, and actually what I wanted to add is that sometimes, let's say we are with someone and they start displaying behavior that we don't like.
Yeah, talk about yourself, Marinos.
For me, I see that like many times, let's say I'm with someone and I think we talked about it again, is that neediness start kicking in, and what I do is that I suppress it down, and as I suppress it down, then I end up resenting them when they're doing the act that I don't like, and I don't express that, and it's becoming like this like crazy circle, because even though I want to practice, like you said, putting boundaries or being honest and authentic, in my head is like, well, if I do that, it feels unpleasant, and I'm always like feeling like that, then I'm not going to be able to please them, and they're gonna go.
Yeah.
So it's like rationalization, like strategies for neutralizing conflict.
Well, yeah, in this situation, it's like, okay, maybe you want to appear cool, but you're actually very needy underneath.
Yeah.
And it's not very easy for those two things to live together, because cool people are not super needy. That's by definition, you know. So you meet someone, and then you're worried all the time about how to behave with them, so they don't leave you.
Yes.
So they don't leave you. But of course, in all of that, you're hiding the side that's needy. You know?
So you mean that we have to practice honest communication about it? We have to address it, what we have to do when it kicks in.
In the group room, you can start to go into more the feelings underneath, which can be anger, can be pain and stuff. You go into that and you start to clear that out. And then, you know, in a relationship, you look for a relationship where you can practice honest communication. We don't have to always appear to be the cool guy or whatever it is for you.
Even if it feels unpleasant, like we should be.
Well, it will feel unpleasant, you know. It will feel unpleasant, you know. But you know, you have to look for a way forward and somewhere be prepared to bite the bullet and say, at times I can be a needy motherfucker. You know, I really need this right now. You know, just practicing expressing needs, saying what you need.
I mean, you know, fundamentally, I think it's about acceptance and self-love, because you know, it's accepting each part of you, the needy part, because we all have it, because we all have the ego, you know, and it's there to help us function in the everyday world. It's not a bad thing.
Yep.
But it's only a bad thing when you allow it to run the program and be the program, which you're not. But it is very much about this acceptance of everything that you have. You know, the bad parts and the good parts, because an understanding that the other person might appear that they're perfect and they're cool and not needy, but actually they are just the same as you are. But once you accept that in yourself, you could begin to accept it in the other person.
Yeah. Acceptance is very useful.
And you begin to understand that actually you don't need acceptance from anyone else, because once you've got that, that actually no matter what's going on inside, you know, that is who you are. Today I'm needy, tomorrow I'm cool. You know, it's normal emotion.
It's normal emotion.
That is being human. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong to feel fucked up, you know, at some moments, as long as you actually allow yourself to feel it.
Yeah.
Not suppress it, like
you
said, not go into that space where, I shouldn't be feeling that because I should be cool right now. But right now you're not.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely fine. So it's understanding, I guess, that acceptance.
Understanding is an element of it.
Understanding and acceptance.
It's an element, because understanding and acceptance are good, and the only issue sometimes can be that comes from the mind, from viewing ourselves through thoughts, and you know how we see ourselves in the world and what's going on inside. And the only issue that comes sometimes when we try to do these things if there's still repressed stuff in the body, they will find a way to come up.
And
so,
that's what I mean. Because when things come up, it's not accepting with the mind, but accepting actually with the heart.
Yeah.
Because when things come up,
Yeah.
it's accepting whatever comes up from the depth.
Yeah.
And just letting, because the mind will be saying to you, well, just go and, and chat to your mate, or go have a drink.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this.
Yeah.
Because you get into a habit of doing it.
Yeah.
It's automatic.
Yeah.
It's conditioning.
Yeah.
So it's just boom, you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
It just happens. I think, that acceptance is actually more of a body.
Yeah.
When it comes from the body, from the heart, that's a real thing. It's not a mind thing.
Yeah, totally. And then we see what we do in bioenergetics is you really check. Because the mind might think, yes, I am really accepting of all areas of my personality.
That's true,
but if there's still a lot of repression in back, there can still be denial there. So what we're doing in bioenergetics is making sure, or it's like a kind of advanced mindfulness, because we can talk about bioenergetics now. Is so saying that what really happens is that when we talk about repression in the body, is that the muscle system, it's on a muscular level, essentially, as far as is known. There's probably deeper levels of it in the cellular level as well. But on a muscular level, what tends to happen, we either develop areas of unnatural rigidity in the muscle system, or areas where awareness has just dropped out of the muscle system entirely. And these are two kind of responses where we end up repressing feelings. And those two types of responses of tension or evacuation come again from our animal ancestry, essentially, that there's two kinds of responses to predators or threats that animals tend to invoke. And some animals do one, and some animals do the other, and it may change on situations. But if you imagine you're a little animal trolling around doing your business in the desert somewhere or in the forest, and suddenly you come across a predator, generally there's one of two options. You either tense yourself to fight or run away and escape, or you will play dead. There's another thing that you can do. Just to sort of, Mr. Predator, no point in eating me, or just even try and camouflage yourself with the environment, playing dead. And likewise, when we look at actually how the body and the brain goes about repressing feelings in the body, it has these two options, either to create a lot of tension, which in some ways is the easier one to address, it's not very pleasant, or by simply evacuating areas of the muscle system and they become just floppy and unresponsive. Your muscles should naturally have a kind of resilience, so that you can take quite a lot of stress and then you just go back to normal. They're not meant to be completely relaxed and floppy, and they're not meant to be totally rigid and tight like some sergeant major. So you have these two types of responses in the body at a muscular level that are going on, where people, either their muscle system has been evacuated in parts and literally that part of their kind of emotional anatomy is gone or seems to have gone, or they're very, very tense in those areas. I was very much a tension person, and that's still my background tendency. And probably the majority of clients I see are in this category, tense. And you will get some who are evacuators, who have left the muscle system. Their bodies become almost sort of saggy and unresponsive, where they've really cut off completely from certain primal emotions. And bioenergetics and body-based therapy in general is a way that we can start to change that, to really go into the muscle system and change, because we are trying to create acceptance, trying to be mindful, basically, of what's happening in our life on an emotional level. And when you start to do this kind of therapy, it's more like you're really going into the body to look. Because even, we've had a lot of mind-based therapy, and CBT can be great, but there's dangers with it as well. The main danger with any form of thought-based therapy is that you kind of create a self-image of someone who's sorted out in your prefrontal cortex, who's really sorted out and together and is now positive and moving out into the world. But in reality, there's still a lot of repressed stuff in the body or dead zones in the body. And when that happens, you can become very ill, basically. This is usually a mechanism of illness. It's like, you know, with bioenergetics, what we're trying to do with this body is really get into the muscle system and see what's going on there, you know, to check with emotional expression. Can we be totally fucking angry, you know, if we want to be? Can we be totally wounded and hurt if we want to be? By expanding into these emotional directions in the group room in a safe environment, we can check, are we repressing or not? Is our muscle system clear or not? Because we might have a self-image of being someone who's really sorted out, but that could be disconnected from reality. Could be disconnected from reality. You know, it's like a healthy human being, one, you know, psychologically healthy human being can go fully into any emotion in a matter of 30 seconds, 60 seconds, you know. It's one definition of psychological health in the school of thought. You can be utterly fucking enraged in a very short amount of time. You know, it's not a problem for you. You know, and you could be utterly feeling wounded and in pain in a certain short amount of time. There's no issue there. And then when you see someone who can do that, like when I had girlfriends before, often I would be quite provocative towards them at times because I wanted to see them in their emotions. Because I would trust someone who I could see was emotionally fluid and available. It's more common in our society, but women do that. To try to trust a man, they want to often provoke to see that the man can feel. Because he might be saying lots of nice things, but how do you know it's really true? Do you really trust this person with your heart? You know, on a deep level of opening. We want to trust the other person. Usually seeing them in the depth of emotion creates a kind of relaxation. We see that they're being authentic in that moment. That they're not holding up a mask or trying to pretend they're a certain kind of person. And so in these kind of therapies, we go into the feelings and the depth of feeling and the intensity of it, just to check that we've got this emotional fluidity, or to develop this emotional fluidity, so we're not holding or controlling anymore. There can be extreme complications, you know, when you study issues like cancer or any kind of major health disorder, where basically everyone has the potential to have it, like cancer. Everyone's got the cancer program written in their DNA, but only some people does it get written out into the body and run, you know, like a kill program, basically. So when scientists try and investigate and doctors try and investigate, why do certain people get cancer? I'm pretty sure what they're going to come up with in the end is they're going to find someone where the mind and body are strongly split, basically. And the person may be living a self-image, thinking they're a certain kind of person, but in reality there's still a ton of shit held in their body, particularly around centres of the body. Because your body is meant to be a team, you know. And what you often see in cancer, I think, is that any kind of kill program, the body has said, I'm not going to support this personality anymore. I had enough of it. You know, I had enough of this person that I'm supposed to be being projected out in the world. You know, I had enough of it, and I'd rather kill the person off, kill the body off, than do this any longer. You know, it's like that's something that I see often in working a little bit with people with severe conditions. Often when presented with the possibility to clear out on an emotional level, you know, that they will do anything. They would rather die than do it. They would rather die than do it. It's actually there in their psyche. You know, they don't actually want emotional health. They want the nice looking self-image. They want the nice looking self-image. They don't want reality. It's something I've noticed personally. I don't know if it's totally true. Scientists don't know. You know, it's like your body is meant to be a team, you know, it's meant to be a team. And it's got a little boss up here, but if the boss takes too much control, then the team might think, fuck it, I'm not going to bother being in this team anymore. I don't want to be in this team anymore. I'm not getting my needs met. Let's just kill this fucker off.
One alternative kind of, the response is the same, or ultimately the effect is the same, but if there's a lot of holding and there's a lot of tension, then there's a really limited blood flow, and then you'd have higher levels of acidity and cellular breakdown. So instead of it sort of being an intentional thing, the cancer forming things could be a byproduct of a body that essentially is very stagnated. Emotionally, the stagnation is there, and then physically that becomes a thing. And then the response, more than anything, is just cells start to break down and malfunction. Which in a lot, I don't know that much about cancer, but there are different ways in which things happen, and it's self-perpetuating. It's like the code breaks, and then it goes into this, and this where you get tumours and things. It's just like self-replicating, and the environment is totally acidic, which to some part could be, I think, a lot to do with our diet and our modern lifestyle. The foods that we eat are very acidic. I think that's one element of it, and then this being the other kind of emotional side of it, perhaps. I mean, it's such a big subject, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
Certainly,
there's lots of different ideas. I know.
Yeah.
Epigenetics. I did read a book about it once and stuff, and environmental factors and internal communication systems. But my feeling is when you've got someone who's just has a natural emotional fluidity and who's okay to be in a range of emotions, that the tendency towards cancer is probably less. You know, that they're kind of okay somewhere. You know. So having talked about all this negative shit, let's just do a little bit, at least a little bit on what bioenergetics is putting your muscle system under stress, which might sound like a not good thing to do when you're already super stressed, but then breathing and feeling your body. That's really it, you know. And because it's rather like the muscle system can get like one of those dishcloths you've got under the sink, you know, where it's like all rigid and hard. If you put some liquid on it, some water on it, and scrunch it around a bit, it becomes, its natural resilience and usefulness returns. Likewise, you know, you're opening up bits of the body. What we learn under stress, physical or emotional, is to contract, hold the throat and try and control the position, try and keep everything under control until it ends. But if you just keep opening and breathing, then the muscle system has a chance to discharge the holding, because that's what we're really talking about here in terms of tension, is holding patterns in the body. It's a basic way to get rid of them. You know, you can, putting your body under these stress positions, working with different energy centers, you can basically get the holding out of the muscle system. You know, so that you know then that okay, now I'm getting more clear, now I'm getting more free, I feel more open, I feel more powerful, I feel more able to hold my boundaries, I feel okay with emotion, intensity. Putting under stress, and likewise with people who've got dead zones in their body, doing bioenergetics, and also emotional expression is good for these guys. You know, to kind of fake it till you make it. For someone who can't experience anger very easily or really express anger, you know, to have an environment where you can really put it out, to really get angry, physically enraged, and just so that your mind can almost learn that it's okay. You know, then afterwards you can hold a more natural sense of boundaries. People tend not to bully you or mess with you. You don't have to exert so much control from a mental level any longer. These are the ideas that we will be working with in this weekend, looking to bring in sometimes very extreme emotions into the group room, you know, so that you have the chance to go there, and then, you know, any holding that's in your system from a mental level can be let go of. You know, you can come out of any form of denial. It's a way of checking, is my body really clear? We don't have scientific ways of doing it yet, so the only real way to do it is to go into emotional situations, to put the body under stress and to see what happens. Can we breathe and feel and keep moving through it? Yeah.
Something that I realized also during workshop sessions, like where we go into emotions, or we do some bioenergetic exercises, that like something like you talked about, like resistance things, like there are layers of resistance. With me personally, it's like my mind tries like drifting away in different ideas about what I have to do later, or something about the past, or many times I'm like finding it as an excuse to don't fully go in the exercise at the ball. Let's say I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna stretch a little bit, I'm not gonna do that because I want to say, like the stress position you say, it doesn't feel pleasant at all. It's not pleasant.
Yeah, it doesn't feel pleasant physically, and also if stuff is coming up, you know, if old patterns of holding are being released, then old defenses will also be activated, and you'll be down here, and suddenly it'll be like, oh shit, I forgot to ring Fred. No, oh, there's no point in doing this exercise today, nothing's happening. Your mind will start playing these narratives. The defensive part of the brain will be triggered, and it will start playing narratives, the intention of which is to get you out of the position, because it's trying to protect you. It's a very old part of the brain trying to protect you, and it doesn't realise that you can feel now. You can open and feel. You know, you can release the past. You can integrate all the unexpressed emotions.
And something else that I wanted to add. So you tell us that when we actually allow ourselves to feel that pain, or like you say sometimes, to go into this like shit or that darkness to see what is there, if we practice that and it feels like natural in a group, then let's say we're outside in work and even in public, we're faced in a situation where we're tense or we realize like we're getting red. So you said it's going to be much more from a place of acceptance. You say we're going to be okay with that. It's not going to be so much overwhelming. Like we're going to let this pain or this thing of people staring be more okay with that instead of just like freaking out and repressing down or removing ourselves from the situation.
Yeah, exactly, man. You know, it's like, because if a lot of people haven't, you know, we look at the kind of extremes of emotion, which are really emotional pain and anger, you know, when you look at those, most people probably are uncomfortable with the extremities of one or both, quite likely. And so when you come into a situation where actually you need to put down boundaries, the fear of getting angry or going crazy, because we haven't done it for so many years or decades, you know, we end up not putting down the boundary and then feeling a bit shit later. And when in the group room you have a safe environment where you can really practice it, you know, where you can really, we'll do some structuring a bit, where you can, part of it you can really be enraged, physically enraged, in a safe environment, and really express anger. And when you see that you can do that, then when, you know, you're at work and someone's annoying you, you can put down clear boundaries easily. You don't have to go to raging and screaming at them, but because you feel okay with anger, you know, one thing is you radiate differently. Bullies tend to look for victims. You no longer look like a victim if you've been a victim. You know, you will carry yourself differently, so they won't come at you. And then when situations do come where you feel you're being invaded in some way, you'll be able to easily put up boundaries without necessarily freaking out and losing friendships. We just have to, you know, you'll be able to say stuff. Other times when someone's been in control a lot and they can't allow vulnerability or pain, you know, then suddenly it feels okay to just be upset for a while and to talk about it, to be with it. When you've been in you know, acute emotional pain in the group room, you have the experience. So I think I'm going to switch this off now and just see if there's anyone else, because we're doing recording all